send it out. Perfect timing. And we will send out that recording after the session. So just quick introduction of myself. My name is Erin Feichtinger. I'm the policy director here at the Women's Fund of Omaha, and I use the she, her pronouns. Thanks for joining us on this Public Power Hour discussion to talk about the upcoming legislative session, especially as it relates to policies that can support survivors of sexual and domestic violence and create communities where everyone is free from gender-based violence. Our very own Nick Zadina on here was on the news recently talking about this precise topic, that sexual violence is rampant in our communities. And I'm just remembering what Tarana Burke said in our Lead the Change event from last year. She said, we can't end sexual violence until we interrupt sexual violence, and courage will move us farther and wider than fear does. So I invite you all to interrupt sexual violence with the Women's Fund through policy change, and let's explore how we can do that. So I'm really just going to take a seat here and let our brilliant panelists and experts talk through a few things. We'll start with Kristen and Melanie from the Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, and they're going to talk a little bit about what the coalition does, how you can support their work, what we know about domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking in Nebraska, and really what issues are most pressing right now. I know that all of them are, but as much as we can. And then I'm going to turn it over to our Freedom from Violence team, starting with Nick Zadina, who's going to describe our past successes in the legislature. Where do we go from here, and what we need from our community of advocates. From there, we'll move over to the lovely and talented and brilliant Tia Manning, also on our Freedom from Violence team, to really talk about like an update on what success in the legislature actually looks like when it's implemented, and what it means for our communities. And then finally to the amazing Angie Lauritsen of Survivors Rising, who's going to tell us about why it's important to center the voices of victims and survivors in this work, and how we can do that as a community of advocates engaged in this work. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen and Melanie first. And if you just want to give an introduction and tell us about the coalition.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. So, excuse me, I'm Kristen McTaggart. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. The last time I did Public Policy Power Hour was last year when I was still at the Women's Fund. So it's like it's fun for me to actually be back in this very different role, but talking about some of the same stuff. So it's good to be here with all of you. I'm going to let Melanie introduce herself, and then I'll jump back in and talk a little bit about the coalition.
Thank you. I'm Melanie Kirk, and I'm new at the coalition. I just took the job of legal director in beginning of November, so I'm still learning, but I am incredibly excited to be here. I come from private practice. I worked in family and juvenile law in Lincoln, and I am so excited about doing policy and doing a broader advocacy umbrella going forward.
So Melanie and I are both pretty new, and what we don't know about the coalition, we're totally going to make up. So a little bit about us. We are a statewide organization that addresses domestic and sexual violence across Nebraska and seeks to end it. And so we do that through public policy, through conducting or commissioning research, and we do that through awareness and communication across the state. And one of the primary roles that we have is to support a network of 20 direct service programs. So collectively, those 20 programs cover all 93 counties in Nebraska. And so when we do public policy work, we're really representing those direct service programs that are providing support on the ground every day to domestic sexual violence and trafficking survivors. Just For information, your local programs for the Omaha area, since I know most of you are probably from this area of the state, are the Women's Center for Advancement, Catholic Charities Omaha Shelter, Heartland Family Service Domestic and Sexual Abuse Program that serves primarily Sarpy and Cass County, and then the Bridge, which is in Fremont and serves primarily Dodge County and some of the surrounding counties there. As far as we really work with those programs to kind of understand what the landscape looks like across Nebraska, which can be very different. Obviously, Nebraska has urban areas and suburban areas and rural areas, and then also what's federally referred to as frontier areas, which basically means nobody really lives there. So just know that we have a really broad landscape that we kind of look at. What I will tell you, based on some research that we recently rolled out just in this last couple of months, is that there is virtually no difference in rates of victimization among, as far as domestic and sexual violence across Nebraska. It doesn't matter what area folks live in, the rates really are the same. So a couple other things that that research has really sort of guided us to, and that we really ingrain in our work, is just understanding that women of color, particularly Black and Indigenous female identifying folks, experience much higher rates of violence. And also just knowing that it often starts young. Most survivors have their first rate or their first experience of being harmed by the age of 15, and then it often continues throughout their lifespan. And so those are some things that we really think about in our work. The other thing I would just share is that the research really, our research really supported that 81.5% of female identifying Nebraskans have experienced domestic or sexual violence. That is 1.4 million folks across our state. So this is an everyone issue, and we really approach our work from that lens, and use that to just help us guide the policy work that we do. A lot of our policy work is really around economic security, which is very broad, as you know. That's everything from affordable housing, access to legal assistance. We have a legal team that provides support to our network of programs. There's a whole, legal assistance is expensive. Free legal assistance is really hard to come by. And there are a lot of reasons that survivors need access to that support. Even things like access to documentation for birth certificate, undocumented survivors with that need immigration status, all of those things. One of the biggest things that we've been looking at is healthcare. I know there's some policy things happening this year around healthcare and things we've supported in the past. Domestic and sexual violence survivors almost always have some sort of bill from a hospital or medical provider when they are seeking access to healthcare for an injury or something related to trauma that they've experienced. It's also true for reproductive support. It's true for mental health support, and it's very real to say that the need for those services far exceeds the availability. And in rural areas of the state, they can be virtually non-existent. So many of our programs don't have access to anybody that is a psychiatrist or a psych nurse practitioner or anything like that. So those are some things that from a policy lens we have been thinking about, or that we're really working towards. And the other thing that I would just add to that quickly before I'll pass it on is that in thinking about those, we're really coming at them from a lens of survivors of all ages. So young survivors, elderly survivors who maybe don't have access to transportation or are really dependent on like the person in their home that's harming them. So coming from a lens of what do survivors of all ages need to get these things, and what does the prevention components look like as well? Because we won't end, prevention is a part of ending gender-based violence, right? And so really thinking about, continuing to respond, but also really leaning into how do we prevent some of these things from happening in the first place.
Thanks, Kristen. and we put links to the coalition and as well as their network of direct service providers in the chat if folks are interested, need resources, or are working with folks who do need resources. And then Nick, Kristen set you up with a great segue talking about policy. So I'll hand it over to you to talk about our legislative work together.
Yes, thank you, Erin. Hello, everybody. Great to be on here. Excited to share space with everybody here. Yeah, Kristen did bring up some things that we have been working on and are going to continue to work on this year. I want to start by talking a little bit about some of our successes from last year and some of the implementation around those successes. So last year, Senator Pansing Brooks introduced a bill, LB 1246, that I had assistance on from a lot of people here, Kristen, Angie, that regarded confidentiality. So this bill provides confidentiality in public reports for survivors up until the court processes begin. This bill actually had a little bit of confusion just this past week because this bill covers sexual assault and human trafficking. It does not cover domestic violence. And we got some questions this week about why in the Mickey Joseph case, the victim's name was released. It does not cover domestic violence. Domestic violence, as per statute, says that it has to be a household member or a family member. So anonymity is kind of out the window anyway. That being said, there have been conversations starting about whether that needs to be extended to those as well. That is not something we're going to work on this year, but it is now on our radar because of the response we got with a lot of people asking questions about why was her name released? It shouldn't have been released. Wasn't there legislation around this? So I think that that's worth further conversation. It's something we've heard here. 1246 got through. It flew. Like it was it was funny because we kind of adopted the bill as something for me to work on in my first year at the Women's Fund, and everybody was telling me it probably won't pass, legislation's really hard, and then literally it was like the way that it worked is we got Pansing Brooks to support it. We got a bunch of conservative female senators to sign on to it. And the Speaker of the House prioritized it. So it flew through. One thing that's kind of weird here at the Women's Fund is we don't get a lot of bipartisan support on all of our issues, but we do get bipartisan support in the DVSA world. It is a tactic we'll continue to use. We'll continue to work across the aisle. And when we do, and we can get things flown through and passed, that's important for survivors in our state, and that's why we do that. The other bill that we worked on, and Kristen actually took the lead on this one more than I did, was LB 1009. This was through Senator Tom Brand, and this is the Domestic Violence Death Team Act that passed. This one had an incredible hearing. We had family members from folks who had lost loved ones to domestic violence speak, and this legislation is starting a team to review cases of domestic violence deaths in Nebraska to see if there's things we can do, see if there's commonality, systems issues that we can identify that seem to impact those who lose their lives to domestic violence, and can we do something about it? This team has started up. The implementation of this team has begun. So it's being led by the AG's office. A woman named Ellen Riley, who is an incredible advocate, is the head of the team. I am excited to say that our own Tia Manning is on this team, and she's going to be telling you more about what this team looks like later in this presentation. So I'm going to leave it at that. And Tia will talk more about how we got this, how this is happening. So after the hearing, the way that this one got through the legislature is that it wasn't a priority bill. So since it wasn't a priority bill, we didn't think it was going to go through, even though we had a really good hearing. But immediately following the hearing, Senator DeBoer approached us and was like, this can be amended onto a bill that I have, which is around maternal and child death teams. So powerful hearings make a difference, I think, is the lesson we learned from that. And if we can have powerful hearings and good messages at hearings, that's going to have senators walk up to us and be like, hey, I know a way that we can get this through. So we put it onto DeBoer's bill, which was prioritized by Senator Vargas, and the death team is now underway. The last bill that I want to talk about that we introduced last session that we weren't able to find priority for was a bill, LB 772, which is introduced by Senator Day. It was the collections bill. We're bringing this one back. This is important. Just like Kristen talked about, there are medical expenses when people are assaulted, and people need to be able to have those not have to fear for being sent to collections when these expenses come up. So what 772 does will prevent survivors of sexual and domestic violence from being sent to collections if they are sent to the hospital because of these victimizations. There's a bunch of information in the chat that Natalia is posting about this bill. We're going to actually reintroduce this bill. Senator Day has a full plate already this session. So this is going to be introduced by Senator John Frederickson. I personally am really excited about this because he's my senator in my district, and he is also the senator that beat out his Stu Dornan by 82 votes. It was a very close vote, and we things are looking better on counts. We're still nervous, but things are looking better on counts for filibusters due to that result. So we're going to be having John work on that. I think it's exciting because John has a background in social work and education. So I think it's going to be a good fit for him. And there are rumblings that he might even prioritize it for us, which would be very exciting. So we'll see about that. We'll keep you all updated. The other bill that we're looking to forward this year is a bill we kicked around last year. Senator Carol Blood is going to be introducing a bill around protection orders and including more items on protection orders and specifically pets. We know that in domestic violence relationships, power and control is at the core of that, and abusers use a lot of different tactics to maintain that power and control. And this power and control, and there's some great stats in the chat right now that I'll reference in a little bit, but one of the ways that this power and control is maintained by those who are abusers and perpetrators of domestic violence is isolation. And those folks who are extremely isolated, the only connection they may have to anything or anybody may be a pet. And then that pet can be part of that power and control. And we want pets to specifically be listed on protection orders as something that can be included. Some stats on the right. We also know that pets are a big part of getting better after the fact. So we want protection orders to be able to include pets so that they are protected in those orders so that the perpetrators cannot have contact with those pets. There is interest in this bill. 37 states across the country already have this bill. We actually already met with the Humane Society, who is in support of this bill and has programming around it as well. But this, one thing we want to be clear about is this is a bill about protecting pets. It's also very much about survivors and making sure that survivors have tools at their disposal for comfort, and that there are less ways that folks who are looking to control them have to control them. So that's another bill that's coming forward that we're really excited about. Another thing that we've been working on this during the off season of legislation is some research and just gathering information. So the Crime Victim Reparations Program has been around for years in Nebraska, and there's just been a lot of issues with it. There's lots of denials. There's lots of systems rules that are confusing. The process isn't clear. It takes a really long time to get payments from this program. And so we're just really intentionally looking at what is this program, how is it functioning, and how can it function better for survivors in Nebraska, so they're not having to wait so long to get payment for these things, or so that the process can be more transparent about how these things happen. Senator DeBoer is doing a legislative study that we are interested in and are going to be looking at over the next year. So stay tuned on that. That's a process that I think we're going to continue, maybe not do anything with this session, but there may be some future sessions where we talk more about that. So just to elevate that. The last thing that I want to talk about is just something that I know y'all hear all the time and stuff like this, but really do contact your senators, send comments. Like, it matters. Even if your senator, you know, they're going to agree with you, let them know, because they probably are hearing from a lot of people that don't agree with them. Even if you know your senator doesn't agree with you, email them, let them know. We hear from senators sometimes that, well, nobody in my district thinks this is a problem. Let them know you think it's a problem. Make it hard for them to say that. And then the last thing that I always like to say about comments. So if something does go up for hearing, which if you track us, follow these bills, if something has a committee hearing, the public is allowed to comment on these committee hearings. This allows people who want to say something about the bill, they allow them to say that without having to go all the way to Lincoln and show up. This matters because when you make a comment on a bill, it is tabulated. And the very last thing that happens in the hearing is they say how many comments were for or opposed that bill. And that is like, when you hear 200 people were for this bill and 2 people were against this bill, that's powerful. So please know that when you do things like comment or post or contact your senators, even though it might feel like it doesn't make a difference, it does make a difference. I see a question in the chat. There is a place that pets can go. They have a program at the Humane Society. I can't remember the name of it. Erin or Tia, do you remember?
Project Pet Safe.
Thank you. So there is, so look into the Humane Society. They have a program that the way that it works is if somebody is looking to leave a domestic violence relationship, the pet can be housed at the Humane Society for an amount of time, especially if the shelter or the place that they're going doesn't allow pets. So there is a program for that. Thank you for that question. Oh yes, and Natalia is posting in the chat. So yeah. And that's all I think I've got. So kick it over to Tia.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, let's hand it over to Tia. You did a great job, Nick, laying out our successes, laying out what we're gonna see, and also how folks can help us all in this work. So Tia, the lovely Tia. Such deep expertise in like service provision and working on the ground with populations, and just would love to hear from you about why legislation matters, and particularly about the domestic violence death review team.
All right. Thank you, Erin. I think it's important when we're thinking about like the freedom from violence legislation that we like those harmed by gender-based violence are folks that are within our community, right? And so when we're making sure we're uplifting survivors' voices and making sure that as we're doing legislation work that we're not only lifting their voices, but also it helps us know and support them, right? Because I think that's something that's really important to make sure that we're doing when we're doing this work, and making sure that we're survivor-led too, because I think oftentimes those voices aren't always heard. So making sure we uplift those. As it relates to the domestic violence abuse, domestic violence death review team. So like Nick was referencing LB 009. We started meeting in October of this year. And so with that, it's comprised of a variety of different folks across the state. So everything from law enforcement officers to attorney advocates, mental health professionals. And so the point of us meeting is tracking deaths and suicides of folks that have died at the hands of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And so with that, we're assessing the circumstances surrounding those deaths, and also from a variety of different standpoints. So we'll be doing interviews with friends and families and with a variety of other folks that people knew, to include the person that caused harm to this person, and with the lens of prevention and making sure that we are able to prevent future fatalities due to gender-based violence. And so with that, at this time, what we're doing is making sure that we can identify, like making recommendations to improve systemic responses to fatalities across Nebraska and all folks impacted by gender-based violence, which I think will be really important moving forward.
Thanks, Tia. One of my mottos is always like everything falls apart in implementation, right? In this work. So you like pass a bill and we all pat each other on the back. And we're like, we did it, we passed it. And then we go on to the next thing. But really that work really, really, really starts and becomes most impactful on that implementation piece. So I'm really glad that you're involved in that, and yeah, making sure it doesn't all fall apart. I am going to pass it over to Angie to talk about why it's so important to center the voices of survivors in this work and provide us with some examples of how we can do this and be intentional about it, and maybe some examples of how not to do it, which we see occasionally, particularly in the media. So yeah, and then how can we as advocates and a community of folks interested in supporting this work help do this work with you. So Angie, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try to squeeze 30 minutes or 45-minute talk into this little short time frame. So I will talk fast, and I apologize, not really, but that's just how I talk. So I have been the policy legislative chair for Survivors Rising for the last 5+ years or so, and have been working with survivors during that time, but also working with all the amazing humans that are on this panel. So at the end of my talk, I'm going to talk about self-care. So what I would like for you to be more engaged in this conversation is to, in the chat, put what you like to do for self-care. So when you're taking care of yourself and when you're looking after your mental health, what do you like to do for self-care? So along those lines, I'm an open book. So if anything comes up, if there's any questions that come up along the way, please know that I'm an open book. And so put any of those questions, you can send them to me directly or in the chat, and I'll try to answer them at the end. So why is it so incredibly important to center the voices of survivors in the work that we are doing? What we have found in the last 5 to 6 years that I've been doing this work is that senators really pay attention to survivors. They really want to hear their voice. They really want to know how this legislation would have impacted their experience as they're working through the judicial process, but also working with law enforcement or trying to get themselves to a safe place. So having that survivor be able to be a part of that. Nick hinted at the fact that when we have a very impactful hearing, that's incredibly important. So having survivors during those at every single part of the journey of a bill from creation through implementation is incredibly important. And so senators really need to hear from survivors and be able to know the numbers also. So what that means is this bill, if implemented, will help approximately this amount of people, or talk about different ways in which this bill can be impactful. Senators on a daily basis are talking to lobbyists, and lobbyists are incredibly important, but lobbyists also hold a lot of hats. So while they may be going to talk to them about the death review team, they might also be going to talk to them about, oh, I don't know, property tax relief and different development, different things. So those lobbyists hold lots of different hats. Survivors, the work that we're doing, everybody on this panel, we focused solely on survivor impact. And so making sure that we're taking care of those survivors is very key. So what we've also learned is that, and where I would like to focus a lot of my work from now on, is actually trying to get with committee members and meeting with senators prior to a hearing. And so a lot of senators have already made up their mind about a certain legislative piece before the hearing even happens. And so when we're talking about working with survivors, we can talk about how each survivor is very different and how they like to communicate and tell their story and be impactful towards legislation is very different for everyone. You know, we need to work with survivors to say, are you comfortable? How are you comfortable about sharing your story? Is it one-on-one? Is it okay to be in a group setting? Do you feel more comfortable talking to a senator one-on-one or their staff one-on-one? Is it through a letter or is it through a phone call? Can we do it in person? Making sure that we're taking care of those survivors and making sure that we are putting them first is ultimately the goal. Through the last 2 or 3 years, if a survivor is coming through Survivors Rising to have an impact on legislation, and if they're going down to have a hearing within at Lincoln, I have been trying to work with them one-on-one for about an hour or so before they go to testify. So we will walk through expectations, we'll walk through public speaking, we'll walk through their self-care plan. So expectations meaning how is a bill created, walking that survivor through the whole process so that we can talk about expectations. I often tell the story of how when I first was asked to testify on a bill, and it was for Senator Crawford's, it was, we've changed it to sick and safe leave, but trying to get sick leave is a part of the healing process, or trying to get to a safe place when you're a survivor. So being able to take time off of work so that you can get yourself to a safe place has been that focus. And so when I was asked to testify on that bill, I went down there and I'm like, this is my bill. And we're totally going to rock this, and we're going to be amazing. And they're going to pass it because my story is impactful. And then when you get down there and you don't understand how any of this works, it could be really like harmful to a survivor to not understand what the next steps are and create those expectations. So I walk through a lot of that. There's a lot of survivors that don't have a lot of public speaking knowledge. And so having, trying to prepare them for what might happen to their body, and like that chemical release of endorphins and everything that happens when you go up to sit in the chair, like understanding that your voice might shake, understanding that your hands might shake. And it's just a chemical reaction. It's not anything else. So if you can prepare yourself for that, I provide tips on when your mouth gets dry, throw a mitt in your mouth before you go up to testify. You know, make sure that your mouth will automatically regenerate so that you're not getting a dry mouth while you're talking. We talk through different tips and walk through everything so that a survivor can understand every little, try to plan for every single nuance, because the one thing that you cannot do with a survivor is take away their control, because that's what happened to them during their abuse. So you try to put them as much in control of the whole process as they possibly can. So that means making sure that, you know, while they're okay with sharing their story today, that might not be the case tomorrow. So making sure that we're constantly checking in with that survivor, making sure that they are completely put first in every situation that we're helping them through when they want to learn, when they are trying to advocate for other survivors, making sure that their needs are being met at every junction of that process. We also talk about the self-care plan. So my policy is that you need to have a self-care plan that incorporates 3 hours past that hearing or 3 hours past that conversation. What does that look like? You know, is it calling a friend? Is it, you know, having a friend come with you so that you can have them with you? And as you're leaving the Capitol, are you driving home right away? Do you need to go and have a coffee and meditate? What does that look like? Are you sitting in your car listening to music or listening to a book? Or what does that look like? Are you calling a child, you know, a friend of yours to just chit chat, to get your mind off of what just happened? Just walking through, trying to help them plan out, what does the 3 hours look like after that plan? So, or after that tested moment in the hearing, and letting them know kind of, here's, you know, when you go and you testify, you don't have to sit around and listen to all the opposition and all the neutral. You don't need to sit around for that, because that goes against your self-care plan. So it's okay to get up and leave. It's okay to go hang out someplace else. And we try to find senators' offices or a room at the Capitol where you can decompress if needed. So trying to help survivors through that whole process is super important too. I am making sure, and, you know, and survivors, they can participate in many different ways, right? So we can work with a survivor up through bill implementation as we're writing that bill. And then when we're asking them to go down and testify at a hearing or talk to a senator, they can do it in many different forms, right? I mentioned phone call, we can write letters, we can make sure that we can also make them anonymous so that their names and addresses aren't used. I've read multiple letters during a hearing that are from a survivor, but I'm there to read their story because their story is so impactful. We talk about the differences between submitting comments online, but also how important it is to have somebody there in person, and the differences that makes for the packet. I can really get into the weeds on that, but it is making sure that the survivor is put first and how they want to be able to share their story. But it's also very important to acknowledge that this is the survivor's story. So making sure that they have ownership of that story, make sure they provide consent if they don't want to share their story anymore, but they can also give consent over to somebody else being a proxy for them. So making sure that they understand how much they want to be involved and how much that they don't want to be involved, and how that may be fluid throughout the whole process. And working through, you know, how as we as the community can be intentional about centering survivors. It's having that knowledge that we are with survivors in every environment that we are in. You know, I strongly encourage, if you are not trauma trained, that you get trauma informed trained so that we can be able to work with survivors and be able to keep them center. So wherever we are at, we are making sure that we are not saying the wrong things, doing the wrong things, but making sure that we're keeping them centered. So along those ways, over the last 5 years, we have created a couple of different guides and supports. So through Survivors Rising, we have created the Survivors Guide for how to testify at the Capitol. And so there's a lot of links through there and a lot of different things to try to help, so that if me or any of us that are working in this area are not able to be with them, it provides them a safe place to go read those documents and try to prepare themselves and to be successful when testifying or interacting with the senators. But we have also created a guide for senators too, and how to interact with survivors and how not to interact with survivors, words that you should use and words to try to stay away from. So we, I'll throw out I think I have time, I'll throw out an example. So we had a hearing before the Education Committee, And it was awful and it was horrible because of the chair that we had at that time. And it was a bill pertaining to Title IX. And so there was flyers put up all over UNL pertaining to Title IX and reporting. And so we had a lot of survivors that were coming into this hearing from campus that none of us had access to. We had no idea that they were coming. And it appeared that some of these survivors were reporting for the first or maybe the second or third time, telling their story to the education committee of how vitally important for this legislation was to pass, but they're telling their story for the first time. So there was a lot of emotions that were getting shared. And we had a very friendly senator that after these survivors would testify, she would go up and give them a hug. And I was just cringing. Like, if you are triggered, if you are in a place where you don't feel safe, having someone come up and touch you can be even more threatening. So trying to walk senators through, even with the best of intentions, making sure that we're still putting those survivors first and trying to provide those services for them that they may need during that hearing process. And so we've created some different guides to help through that process. And I think that was all that I had. I also want to mention I'm 30 years post-crisis. That's why I'm an open book. I've told my whole story. My expertise is in childhood sexual assault. So I want to be very adamant when I talk about the expertise that survivors have. Their experience is their expertise. This is what they are an expert in. And my expertise, I stay in my lane. And so when it comes to other forms of abuse, there are other experts in that field that can talk about that. I have not experienced human trafficking. There are a lot of experts that are willing to talk and hold that space, and I give that space to them. And so making sure that we are respecting everybody's expertise when it comes to these different areas, I think is vitally important, and how we can support each other is incredibly important. So if you ever have any questions for me and how I can help, I run into survivors all the time that are 6 months out of crisis, or they're a year out of crisis, and they're bold and brave and amazing. And they're stronger than me, I feel like, because I'm 30 years post-crisis and I still have a hard time being in certain situations, talking about what I went through, the trauma that I went through for 14 plus years. So it's always important to make sure that we acknowledge and respect and honor the expertise of our survivors, and make sure that they are creating their own space in order to help advocate for themselves and in their own time. So if you ever have any questions for me, please reach out.
You're just amazing. I just wanted to say that. It's like been my general feeling. Yeah, thank you, Angie. And I think that the point that you brought up is important. I think just broadly too, for anybody who's bringing their story to this work or their experience, you are not required to share your story with elected officials or with the news or with anybody. You're not required to like prove that you're worthy of compassion and protection and all of the things, you know, that we hope for in this world. So I just want to make sure people know that, you know, if you're going to get a lot of advocacy emails and stuff like that, they're like, share your story, share your test. Like, you don't have to do that. And thank you, Angie, for working so hard to provide a different way, or your, you know, the broad spectrum of avenues to engage in advocacy. It's really incredibly important. So yeah. All right. Well, we had a question in the chat that I'm going to open to the panel, specifically around with respect to prevention. And I'm going to pose the question in the chat and add to it so that we can have a fruitful discussion. But interested in hearing more about approaches with men around prevention, and just broadly, since we talked about prevention at the beginning, what are some tools or resources, not resources, but what should we be thinking about when we're thinking about prevention, and where does it intersect maybe with other aspects of our work? Kristen had talked about economic security, right? And all of those issues. So just being able to connect those. So open it up, go for it.
I'm happy to start. Oh, Nick, do you want to start? I'm happy, or I can start and then you can fill in. All right. So Rachel, who's our Director of Prevention and Community Engagement, would be so happy that someone asked this question. And I would say prevention is very broad, but I would ask that we push ourselves away from the idea that prevention is like, you know, once a semester, somebody gives a presentation to young people in their classroom about like how not to get raped or something like that. Like that's not prevention. That's a little bit of awareness. Prevention starts early. I've been talking to my kids about what consent is at an age appropriate way since they were old enough, you know, since they were 3, as far as they have consent over their body, who they give hugs to, no, they don't have to sit on the creepy Santa's lap, all the things, right? So I think prevention starts early and it is ongoing. And it is with folks of all genders, really. It's, I mean, our research was very clear that male identifying folks also experience violence. Trans folks in particular have much higher rates of violence. So prevention is for everyone. And it is really thinking about what does it mean to be a bystander? How do we empower young people to step in and intervene when they, if they see something, to say something. But I think it also really, for me, is challenging what we think of as prevention. A lot of policy work, even around economic security, like I talked to, providing infrastructure for survivors to access economic security prevents them from potentially being harmed again. So like prevention, we have to think about prevention as interwoven in really everything that we do. I guess that's what I would say, that it's broad, it's in all our communication, and also that it really starts very young. We have to be talking to our young people about prevention all the time.
My 3-year-old daughter, I was brushing her hair this morning and we're talking about consent a lot. And she told me, Mommy, this is my body. You can't touch it.
I love it.
Well, I agree. And I still have to brush your hair.
I mean, they'll totally use it against you for sure. Like my 14-year-old son the other day told me that prevention, or he said, Mom, what do you mean people don't know what consent is? Everybody knows what consent means. And I was like, oh, buddy, I'm so happy you think that, but I built an entire career of people that don't know what it means.
I mean, just adventures and education, right? But so critically important. You're absolutely correct. And Nick, I just interrupted because I had to tell a story about my toddler. I just had to. So
I welcome it. I welcome those stories. Yeah, prevention is something that we talk about here at the Women's Fund as well. And we've been talking about it in a couple of different ways. We know people who are perpetrators of domestic violence. We want to give them tools so that they can understand the harm they have caused and stop the harm, because we know there's a lot of recidivism with it. So one thing that we always look at is how are we reaching those folks and giving them some sort of tools or access so that they can stop. Right. So that's one way. That being said, that's rough because there's not a lot of great research out there about what is effective in that realm. So the other way that we focus on this, because it's not this or that, it's both. The other thing that we focus on is education. So I always tell this story. Junior high Nick wanted to learn nothing about science, nothing about math, nothing about any of that. And junior high Nick wanted to know how to get a girlfriend. But nobody talked to me about healthy relationships or what it meant. So you know what I did? I watched movies that taught me how to do that. And I don't know if y'all have seen The Wedding Singer, but the grand romantic gesture in The Wedding Singer is that, so the story is there's this woman who's going to marry this guy who throughout the whole thing is portrayed as this awful person and he's terrible. And, but she's going to marry him. She decides in the end. And she's on the plane to go marry him. And Adam Sandler's character gets on this plane and in front of everybody on the plane starts walking up and down the aisle of the plane singing a love song to her. And she thinks that's lovely and says that she'll marry him. after rejecting him multiple times throughout the movie. So what junior high Nick thought was that if I just work hard enough, I can have a girlfriend. I just need to continue to ask them and continue to tell them and continue to be there. This was reinforced in so many romantic comedies of my era. Say Anything, and Say Anything, John Cusack is rejected by a woman, and what does he do? He stands outside of her house and holds up a boombox that's playing a romantic song. Getting on a plane, holding up a boombox outside of somebody's house without their permission is not consent. Like we are actually teaching the opposite of consent. So when we talk about, and I love what Kristen said about this isn't a day thing, this isn't a week thing, this is embedded. And one of the ways that we can embed this relationship knowledge that, by the way, kids want is by having comprehensive sex education. Comprehensive sex education is a huge component of ending gender-based violence, of ending these power-based violences. Also, if you see in the chat, we had an amazing guide that we developed this year in conjunction with the coalition and a bunch of community partners about preventing sexual violence. So please click on that and share it far and wide. There's lots of good stuff in there about how to talk to kids about things that matter, handling rejection. But yeah, prevention and giving people the information they need so that these things don't happen in the first place is, and I mean, it's something we're thinking about all the time at the Women's Fund. How can we fund places that do that instead of just the places that are doing interventions after it's already happened? So yes, and whoever asked this question, it's a really good question.
Thank you all for that, and for connecting this work as well to the comprehensive sex ed work. We all know that comprehensive sex ed is not just about teaching kids about their genitals. It's about teaching kids about consent, how to stay safe, and about how to have healthy relationships and recognize unhealthy ones. So critically important work that all of us here have been involved in. So, and it's not over. The fight isn't over. So we'll keep working on that. Wanting to be mindful of everyone's time. And keeping in mind too what Angie said about self-care. So people who know me well know I'm not like a particularly bubbly person. I don't know. So trying to end on a positive note on this lovely Tuesday. So I would just be interested in hearing from the panelists, like this is hard. I mean, this is hard work. It's hard work. Listening to all of you and the work that you've done over your careers is just incredible and powerful and impactful. And it's also really tiring. So I'm wondering what brings you hope in this work? What brings you hope in this advocacy? What's given you life right now and, getting ready for the next day?
I guess I will go first. The last year has been super interesting for me. And so it's almost like inserting myself into a trigger happy environment for what I just went through. But I received the most amazing text from a survivor that I was trying to help during the last year. And when I sit with someone and I tell them, how can I support you? What can I do? And when you show up for that survivor, you follow through and you actually do a couple of things. And for me, it was minimal. It wasn't a lot of time. That was impactful to that survivor. So know that even the little things that we do provides so much support to those survivors, and it means so incredibly much. So I want to thank everybody that's on this panel and everyone that's a part of this call. I am so thankful for you and everything that you have done to provide space to support survivors through policy work. I appreciate you, and I look forward to the upcoming session and the work that we're going to be able to do together. So thank you.
I can go next. I would say For me, what gives me hope, so my brother is in like the big corporate America world and read something in the paper that I had the privilege of making a statement in, and he shared that in a setting that most folks probably wouldn't necessarily have read the article. And so that also sparked a lot of conversation within his employment and ways, and asking questions of how they can be involved. And for me, that gave me hope that there are folks out there that may not necessarily be in the trenches with us and want to be. So that for sure as well. And then also lifting up what Kristen and Nick said. I also have young kiddos who, having those conversations with them and being able to know that I'm not only doing this for myself as a survivor and survivors, also my kids and the young adults that are coming up too, and seeing that on their faces is huge. So.
I am happy to jump in and also to echo all of that. But, you know, I've been in different roles in this movement now for over 20 years, which I feel like makes me I feel like I always feel old when I say that. You know, I think the balance is I've been in this movement long enough to where I've known people that have done all this incredible work that are no longer with us. And so that's been sort of sitting heavy with me this year. I promise this is not the happy part, Erin. But I think the thing that continues to give me energy and that continues to re-engage me in the work over and over is similar to what Angie and Tia said, which is just that there's young people that continue to step into this work and bring new ideas and new lenses and some really incredible new ways of engaging and thinking about it. And, you know, the first part of my career was in direct services, and the latter part has not been in direct services, but I've continued to really intentionally try to engage with those that have lived experience, both who do this work and who don't, but want to be involved somehow. The resilience of survivors always is so impactful for me. And having a survivor tell you thank you for creating a safe space for me to share, or thank you for creating a safe space for me, or for giving me an opportunity to talk about something that nobody else wants to hear, just helps me know that I'm where I need to be, and that you know, we're going to continue to do all of the work and change all of the policies, and you know, make our state a better place for individuals who have these experiences and who live this every day.
I can jump in super fast. I'll be very brief. We recently had Anita Hill speak at our conference, and she said something that really stuck with me. It's not a sprint. It's also not a marathon. It's a relay race. And so the young people that we can get engaged, and the young people, the next generation, can make a difference. The other thing that I think about with this is that sometimes there are days when it feels like nothing's changing, but then if you look back on the macro scale, a lot's changed in the last 10 years, a lot's changed in the last 20 years, and a lot's changed in the last 30 years. So when you take a look at this big scale, we're still figuring this out. This whole movement is still pretty young when we're talking about societal and cultural shifts. So that's something that I keep remembering, the little steps do make for larger ones over time. Gentle pressure consistently applied creates change. Kristen McTaggart.
Kristen, what a beautiful quote.
I say that all the time. Yeah.
I love it. I love that. That's such a good, and a reminder that just yeah. Anyway, I'm having a lot of thoughts and feelings. So I really appreciate all of our panelists for sharing your voices and your expertise with all of us. To our attendees, just a reminder that your senator works for you, it turns out, and all of your elected officials at every level, your school boards, your city councils, your natural resource districts. Who knows? All of them work for you. So you can contact them and let them know that you support survivors of sexual and domestic violence, and that you want to put an end to gender-based violence in our communities. Nick brought up a good point at the beginning, that, you know, even if you think that this person isn't going to be on your team or isn't going to support it, again, like, you're a citizen, you're a constituent, and you can absolutely email them and say, hey, this is an issue that I care about, and you know what, like, I'm going to be watching it. So I'm sure other advocates are like, you should be really nice to them, and I'm like, make them know you're watching. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and for all of our attendees. We will be sending out a recording. We're documenting all of the resources that have been shared in the chat, all the questions that maybe didn't get answered, and we will follow up with everybody with not only a recording, but also those resources, those incredibly important resources that we've all, that our panelists have shared. So that's the end of our Freedom from Violence panel. Join us on Friday on December 9th to talk about economic security, which is connected to all of our work. Sign up for our policy update emails and actions alerts, get inspired by our Power Hour playlist, and please, please, please reach out to the Nebraska Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. Keep in touch with them, follow their policy updates. Same with Survivors Rising. Angie's an incredible force in this state, and we are so lucky to have you in whatever capacity we can, although we can be a little disappointed about. It's okay. And also support all of these organizations as well financially. Your donation of any amount helps us to work towards a future built on gender and racial equity. So we are 1 minute past, and I want to make sure everyone has space to practice some self-care, hopefully at some point today. So I want to thank everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye, panelists. Goodbye.